And welcome to Talks of Outcasts. We are two preachers of the gospel. He's Miles, I'm Chris. We talk about stuff, and we're going to talk about stuff today.
That's
But
right.
first, Miles, how was your Easter? We're recording this on Monday night. How was your Easter?
It was good. I was a little nervous, I expected a crowd, but I didn't expect what I got. It was a crazy amount of people. And it was encouraging, but also daunting because you know what you're doing. Easter, you would think Easter would be an easy sermon, right? You would think that it would be something pretty cut and dry, and I guess it still is, but it's still daunting when you have that many people, there are unbelievers in the crowd. The heaviness of it is definitely way more than expected.
Right.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. I say that because there's just more people that in this crowd that there's way more people, or at least you feel like, you can't really know. But there are people who usually don't come to church often, and whether they're believers or, stuck in sin or whatever, it's just a heavier weight. And so it was encouraging, but also, um, I don't know if the word stoic would fit, but it was very daunting as well.
Yeah.
So it was very good. What about you? You've been
Yeah,
doing
we
this
had it.
for ever?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another Sunday for me, bruh.
That's right,
No,
man.
no, we had a really good day, and had the typical Easter bump up in numbers and attendance, and so that's good. I used to have a preacher tell me when I was just starting out that Easter was kind of a picture of what your church could be in a year. That's never been the case for me, but I guess it's the case for some people. So we'll
Be
see.
nice if
We'll
it
see what.
was, huh?
Yeah, we'll see what the Lord does. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, here's what I wanted to talk about with you tonight, and I want to start off with a question. And the question is it possible to be around people every single week and still not actually know them? Right? Because we see people every Sunday, we see some of them every Wednesday, but most of those relationships never move past the surface level. And so the question I want to ask is why? Why do we have such a hard time building good relationships in the church? Because everybody says they want that.
Hmm.
I've heard that 1,000 times. We want deeper fellowship, deeper community. But why is it so difficult to really bring that about in church?
Well, if I had the answer, I could write a book and make lots of money selling it.
And you could drive a Lexus.
Not yeah. Hey, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be driving more than a Lexus. That's a promise.
Well, you give some money to your old buddy Chris and stop being so stingy all the time.
I would drive a Rolls Royce to you and then buy you like a Toyota or something.
Oh, nice.
Hey, there you go,
Yeah, I'll take a
peasant.
nice
It wouldn't be
Toyota.
nice. It'd be like a 1990s model and
Yeah, right.
the rust bucket that
300,000
is.
miles on it. Yeah,
I just
chip
want you to
tires.
remain humble. I don't want to give you that that ability to
I
elevate yourself.
I really appreciate you playing the role of the Holy Spirit in my life like that. Thank you
That's
very much. I don't know what I'd do without you.
I was looking out for the best of you, man.
Yeah.
Sanctification is a long, drawn out process. So,
Well, so why? Okay, so I mean,
well,
if we're just looking for like really nuts and
hmm,
bolts, just very ground level
sure.
reasons why this is difficult, um, what would you chalk it up to?
I don't know if this is going to do what you want it to do, but I would say just before you can talk to people like that and have those relationships, the first thing I would ask is, how's your family life? Because if you like where I am, I'll be fully transparent with people. I usually am, but like our family doesn't do well at conversing with each other. And so like we don't have that closeness in the home. We did when I was little, but as we all grew up, kind of all did our own thing. And so you don't have that ability to do that. And then it kind of just keeps filtering over. I'm trying to
Sorry,
be
I could
serious.
I know, I couldn't help myself, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You're actually making a very serious point. Okay.
no, no, it's fine. That's what we do here. And so I would say that, a lot of times we may want that, but we may not even know how to do it. So there's the not knowing how to do it, which we can get further into. But then there's also the idea if I share too much, people are going to judge me. They're going to look at me in a different way. Um, if do I get so if I get so personal, are they going to be even? Are we even be able going to talk to each other? I know you and I could probably talk about counseling as a pastor and how you lose members because they tell you too much or they
Right,
feel like they feel like that. So we can kind of divulge into that. And then the other side is I just don't think we have enough time, or we think, let me be careful. We think we don't have enough time to devote ourselves to that kind of relationship. And so it may even be, they used to say when you're dating, that person doesn't want to or has a fear of commitment, has commitment issues. I think that can apply here as well, into the local church and then even into those relationships. Because like everything else, that's work and it's
right,
time and it's effort. And so I think if you can, if you could probably, if you had a book and you're writing that, you'd have to hit each one of these things individually, and then probably come out, you'd have sub chapters of each major thing about how that goes and those type of things. Introverts versus extroverts, but really I would say in a church setting, we have all of those and it changes. Like I used to be an introvert. You and I both talk about how you at one time, was an introvert and then things changed and I think the love that the spirit gives us and then realizing how important church is. And I think the other side of that is if in your life you've never experienced how important church is, like how important it is to your life, that also plays into it as well. Um, and the other side of it is you're just a closed door. If you're going to be closed off, then you're never gonna, and sometimes it, I don't know. I can keep going, but we need to stop and kind of hit some of these things. But the last thing I would say is it's not an age thing where the older don't want to talk to the younger don't want to talk to the older. Is they don't know what to say. And so instead of saying something to get the ball rolling, they say nothing. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's not so much that they're old versus the young. It's just the fact that they feel like they have nothing in common. And so they have no way of communicating or need to. Like, what does a 22-year-old have to say to me when I'm 70? You know what I mean?
right.
Or at least
Is
that's
the
what
soup
you're.
too hot?
Yeah, yeah. Are you okay, grandpa? What
This soup's too hot. Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
so
I think go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead. I was
Well,
finishing
I
the
mean,
thought.
I was just gonna say that I think the time issue is legit if think about again, because we're talking about people that you see every week at church, and so we're talking about a church context. And
Sure.
so, um, just by nature of the moments are going to be rushed and they're going
Yeah.
to be crowded, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I get to church 5 minutes before Sunday school starts. And so, I might go get a cup of coffee, but I don't really have time because I got to get to the class. And then, and I might have a couple of minutes to, sit and talk to whoever I'm next to, before class starts. And then class starts. And now we're doing something else. And now I've got 10 minutes to get to the worship service and maybe go grab some water or maybe go do something else real quick. And so, everything is compressed into these short windows of time, right?
Mhm.
I mean, just the nature of it. And in order to have deep and personal relationships, you have to have uninterrupted time.
Mhm.
You can't build any kind of a relationship of real closeness if there's not time to really grow that. One of the
Yeah.
reasons that you and I became such good friends is that we would take time and we would drop by one another's office and just,
Mhm.
hey, what are you doing? Now, not everybody has the flexibility that we have in their
Sure.
jobs, and that's fair, but it does illustrate the point that in order to have closeness, you have to have uninterrupted time. And another thing I think, especially in the church context, that's a problem is that everything is routine. And
Mhm.
so we don't write it out, but our movement and the environment becomes almost like a script that we follow. And
Yeah.
so we walk into the same door, we say hello to the same greeter, we have
Mhm.
the same conversations. How are you? Good. How are you? Did you see the game last night? I did. Like nobody expects depth, and so
Mhm.
nobody initiates it,
Mhm.
right? And then on top of that, we have the problem that you mentioned, and that is that if you're going to be close to somebody, you can't do that without being vulnerable.
Mhm.
And vulnerability is always a risk. And
Sure.
so people just sort of default to these very shallow, very safe interactions because they're safe.
Mhm.
Um, and we fall into this false assumption of if I see them regularly, then I must know them. And the reality is you don't.
Mhm.
You don't really know them. In fact, the person that emailed us the question, she made the point, I want to know what makes them, I'm going to shorten it a little bit, but basically what she was saying was, I want to know what makes them tick. Well, you're not
Mhm.
going to do that. Um, and you're not going to be able to find that out unless you're able to spend long periods of time and unless you're intentional
Mhm.
about finding those things out.
Yeah. So let's chop this up because you said a whole lot. So let's just go with the time factor. I think one of the things that I can remember and I do cherish about the way church used to be was the different times we had of fellowship in the sense of and the reality is this is degraded, so we can't just go back to the way it used to be. So if you're listening to this and you heard me gripe about, some people holding the traditions and becoming traditionalists, I want you to be very obvious that you can't put the genie back in the bottle because we've changed. And somewhere along the lines we've changed with how we view church. But one of the things that you said there, Chris, and if you remember, I had intentionality with coming to your office.
Right.
Like I was new to town. I had really had no one else. Not that you were like, man, it's all I got is old Pastor Chris. uh,
Well, I don't have any other
yeah,
options and
yeah, but also I was intentional with my own time.
right.
And in that, again, it went back to what I said earlier about how important the church is to you. Because at my last church, there was my wife and kids and another family who just adopted us. Like they loved us like we were their own. In fact, we still go see them. Like I would go visit, a distant uncle or something like that, and maybe even more so closer than that. And so there's just that intentionality with time. And, if I'm in Sunday school, because how it happened is it developed to where I needed them in my ministry and they volunteered. Like I didn't ask them to do anything. They just showed up. And I can even talk to that person. I'm like, I don't even remember when you came on the scene. Like you just showed
Mm,
up one day. And then after that, we just we somehow by the grace of God, we just, loved each other and our families loved each other and it just meshed so quickly and so easily. And so to the point of this is your time has to be intentional. Now, I do know church is very rigid in time because if you don't, like you know as well as I do as a pastor, if we don't finish at a certain time, there's going to be some people upset or
right.
if whatever that is. But you as a person, if you start to show people that you're intentional with time and that you're coming in to do more than the surface level of, "Hey, Jim, did you catch the game?" But, you just start asking those questions, and it's not gonna hit everybody, right? You're not gonna just all of a sudden, "Well, now I'm friends with everybody in the church," because that's not a reality. And if
Right.
you think that's a reality, you need to stay in some bounds here because your church, I don't know what it runs, but we can just stick with mine. Let's just talk about Easter Sunday since it was up. We had 340 plus. You guys had 5 something plus or whatever. there's no way if that was a regular thing that you could know everybody in that place.
Sure.
But what you have to start doing is you start with the people that you're with all the time. And because you know as well as I do, we can be in Sunday school for 20 years and know nothing about somebody, and there's only 10 of us in there.
Right.
But if we
Yeah.
spend sorry, go ahead. No.
No, I was just going to say because that's actually a transition into what I wanted to dive into next along the same lines. What our listener said was, and I found what she said. She said, "I don't feel like I really know them unless I know what brings them joy or what struggles they are dealing with."
Mm,
So that's something to kind of build on. Like what does it mean to really know somebody? Like relationally.
sure.
What does it really mean to be close to them? And just to use her words, you know someone when you know what burdens them. You know
Mhm,
someone when you know what excites them or what they're afraid of or what they're hoping for. So the goal is not information. I think we're
yeah,
good at like collecting data points about one another. The goal is understanding one another.
mhm.
That's what it means to really know someone.
Yeah, yeah, no, and even in those situations, it's all about, and the thing is, I think a lot of times we think in church people are just gonna start word vomiting and throwing up everything that's wrong with them, but that's not how it is, and so sometimes, and I'm not being critical of the email writer because I've been on both sides of this, where I have been the person that's initiated and I've also been the reserved person, right? Just depending on my situation. And a lot of these ways have changed now because I do want to know people more so than just know your kid, you have kids and all these things. I do want to know how I can be in their not in their life necessarily, but be in a way in a position to where they know the door is open to have a conversation. And this was before I was a pastor. This is just because I know how important it is to have someone that looks at not necessarily things like I do, but we all come through the view of Christ and have a biblical mindset, or at least someone like I need people above me that know more, and I need people below me to help keep me accountable and teach and stay in line with I think the discipleship process. And so it's one of those things with being intentional with time and not trying to bite off like if I have a class of 20, not trying to make them one day I'm going to meet all 20, but it's each individual, maybe it's one person at a week and it's being intentional with them by I know we're busy, I know you're busy in church. If you don't have lunch plans, would you be interested in going to lunch? And I don't want to be if it's a no, by all means be no, but I think it goes back to hospitality that in a lot of ways we've lost the ability to be hospitable because everybody's so they just have like you said, point A, point B, C, D. If Chris goes along 15 minutes, then I'm 15 minutes behind. Or
Right.
or or the kids were a mess this morning, so I got to church right as Sunday school has already been for 10 minutes and now I'm frazzled and then, it feels like the day's gone to pot. And so you just have to slow down with people and, put yourself out there. Are you gonna get burned? The answer to that question is yes, but that doesn't mean you stop um, because I wish I had more church members like this lady that wanted to know.
Right.
I mean, and I know I do, so you gotta be careful when saying that statement. But I want, but I think the thing I would tell people is just put yourself out there. And yes, let me be the first to tell you, there are gonna be lots of lots of pain and lots of agony, but also you're asking to be in the mud with them. And you're asking to really know if you really want to know the burdens or you really want to know what make people tick, all I'm going to tell you is go put your hands in the mud right now and realize that it's going to be dirty and in a place where, it's just a tough thing. I think it's a tough
Sure.
thing.
I really like a lot of what you said, but there are two things that you said that I really want to sort of highlight. One is your comments about being intentional are absolutely spot on. deep relationships don't happen by accident.
Mhm.
They don't. Especially in once week moments. You have to be intentional about it. And the next thing that I would say, and you kind of you mentioned this, but you have to narrow the field
Mhm.
because you can't go deep with everybody. You just can't. There's not enough time, and quite frankly, relationships require too much work to be able to go
Mhm.
deep with everybody. And so you have to pick 2, 3 people because depth requires focus.
Mhm.
If you've ever had, a deep conversation with somebody or a meaningful conversation with somebody and you knew that they were beginning to zone out, like, we've all experienced that. Um, if you're thinking about, "Hey, I wanna get really close to these 35 people," it'll never work. And so you have to narrow the focus.
Mhm.
Um, and so then it becomes a matter of, learning to ask, good questions. I mean, just on a real fundamental level,
Mhm.
you have to learn to ask not just generic questions, but targeted questions. What's been weighing on you lately? What's something you're excited about right now?
Mhm.
What's been challenging for you this week? Now, initially, you're going to get a lot of crazy looks because we're just not used to talking to
Yeah.
one another that way, and we're not used to being spoken to that way either.
Mhm.
But if you always ask surface level questions, you will always have surface level relationships.
Mhm.
Just quite frankly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'd
And
say
and
with
you're also right about getting your hands dirty too, but go ahead.
yeah, we'll get to the hands dirty. What I would say though is if you're asking questions, then be ready to answer those same questions when they ask.
Right,
Or even, um, usually what I do is I prime the pump. I'm they already know more about me than they should before I start letting you know what I mean?
right,
Sometimes. It depends on the moment and time because there's one thing I've learned in BCM ministry is there's this thing where my last boss used to teach listening skills and how to pay attention to someone, body language, and all those things. Those are important. Those are important skills to have because if you're trying to truly get past the surface, then you also have to make somebody comfortable. And so the other side of that is even in you when you get them to that comfortability, you also have to be willing to be just as vulnerable with them as you're asking them to be with you.
right,
Because why would I and I come to this often is why would I expect someone to give me answers to questions that I won't answer?
right,
I just and it's not and that's one of those things that I think people need to understand. Sometimes what I'm afraid to share is because I don't know if you're the person I need to do it or why you're asking me or some of those things in instead of I may briefly, if you're listening to a conversation, you can pick up on cues. One thing that I've always appreciated about when you and I talk, you listen to my conversation and then you pick something to bring back what we're really getting to. Like you
right,
understand, like even what you did with the 2 points of what I'm speaking about is that just the ability to then okay, well how can I not insert myself, but how can I get more about it? How can I talk about more of this and say, wow, actually, I have not been, I don't know how you feel exactly, but I've been in a similar circumstance and, tell me more about this. And then you start going through those back and forths. And next thing you know, you've got this connection with Jimmy that you never thought was possible, all because you were vulnerable to him as he was to you, and it starts to change and it starts to morph. But again, that's that narrowing down to, to coming down to someone smaller. And I think and a lot of times we're so afraid of being labeled the clicky place that we forget that there are people that we are going to be more drawn to for a reason,
Sure.
for a
Right.
purpose. And I think what people need to start understanding is that if we become good listeners and good people and in that idea of being relational, they're going to tell other people that this is someone you can talk to.
Right.
What you have to understand is if you eat the elephant one piece at a time, one bite at a time, that you don't know what God or you don't know what God's going to do with the ability that you've given or what He's given you. You just start where you can and then let God fill in the blanks of it. And you just never know. There have been people that I didn't know I helped and I helped them,
Right.
and they come to you, I mean, times later and be like, what you said here really helped me. And I'm like, well, I don't know when I don't say that to 'em. I'm like, that's right, bro. I give them the high five and
Right.
the, hey, tell everybody that Miles is helping. But there are lots of times where I'm like, I have no idea when I even talk to them about it. And a lot of times
Right.
this was through conversation you and I had sitting talking at a table. Or like today, I was talking to a student about questions she should be asking her future husband and working through these things so that they're not disappointed when they're married and they never had these conversations. And
Right.
there was someone else in the room that was listening intently. And that's the thing is it's just being so open and even intentional with time matters. And then what I would tell the
Yeah.
person that has emailed us to us is that's the big one. That is the huge one. Is the availability of time and being intentional with your conversation. And not just to be a nosy Mary or whatever, but to really and I think some of these things are gifts that we're given. Um, but also we can't escape that because we think, well, I'm not gifted at that, so that's not me. I don't think that that was what I would mean by that. But some people can do these things easier than others, but we're all meant to. Paul says we should pray for the gifts, right?
Right.
And so these are things that we need to discipline and spiritually work through and those types of things. So
Do you think, when we're thinking about conversations, it's almost like you have to be, and we're talking a lot about being intentional, but here's another area where I think we have to be intentional. You have to stay, especially if it's someone you don't know very well, but you want to know, you have to stay in the conversation longer than what feels natural.
mhm.
Because most people, as soon as I answer your question, like, we feel like, okay, well, now it's time for the conversation to end, right?
Yeah.
But depth really happens after that initial
Mhm.
response. And so, learn to ask, follow-up questions and then another follow-up questions. And if you have
Mhm.
to sit in silence for, 15, 20 seconds, then do it. But don't be
Yeah.
afraid to stay in the conversation longer than what might feel natural.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's don't let silence scare you. Don't be afraid of silence because sometimes you gotta wait it out because maybe they're trying to catch up with what you're doing, or they're making a decision on whether they want to keep going and having these conversations. And with students and adults, young adults, I'll let silence go as long as it needs to because
Right.
sometimes it's just, well, you know, I know you got something to say. I can see it in your face, but you're not wanting to say it, and I'm not getting to the question that's bringing it out. So I'm just going to sit here and wait for
And
you
wait on you.
to
Yeah.
and wait on you. And a lot of times that's what and it works. There's been times when I've sat in your office and I'm wringing my hands because I know I want to say something, but I don't know how to say it or if I want to say it. And pretty soon silence will bring it out. And it's really the spirit because I think the
Right.
spirit is I don't think our God is so imminent and so vastly infinite that he knows exactly where we need to be, sovereign, and he knows exactly where we need to be and while we're there and the things we should be saying. And
Right.
so it's not an accident that I sat there and silence brought out what needs to be brought out, but it's just the availability of knowing that you can be quiet and you're not really not there. You're still
Right.
there. The conversation is still there. You're just waiting on the person to give in or not or not, because sometimes you just Irish goodbye somebody. You're like
What's Irish goodbye somebody?
that's when you just walk away without saying bye or anything else. You just
That's actually happened?
uh well, not generally in conversation, but usually I have someone Irish goodbye me every once in a while.
Okay.
That's when
Well,
you would say as Chris, you would be like, "Well, all right then," and then you
yeah,
would leave
and then just walk off.
and then
Yeah.
walk off. So, I would call that an Irish goodbye as well. So,
You said something else, Miles, that I think is really good and really important to the conversation, and that is that there has to be a bridge. And so, again, we're talking about a listener who is specifically asking about relationships within the church
yeah.
and how can they build relationships with people that they only see once a week. And so that's really the specific question
Mhm.
that we were asked. Um, so there's got to be a bridge because
Mhm.
there's got to be some kind of outside interaction. And so whether
Sure.
it's meeting someone for coffee, whether it's
Sure.
sending somebody a follow-up text, and the follow-up text doesn't have to be much.
Yeah.
It can be something as simple as, hey, enjoyed visiting with you, um, you know, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Obviously you can meet for lunch, right? And
Sure.
and and obviously we're talking about, appropriate, right? Appropriate lunches. We don't need to dive too deep into that, I don't think. But
Yeah.
you've got to eat,
No,
I've
no,
got to eat,
no, no,
and
explain that to me.
and that was one of the things that really fostered our friendship
Mhm.
was that we would meet for lunch at least once a week.
Yeah.
And then we would meet with somebody else. We kind of brought somebody else, and we would
Sure.
bring other people along with us. um and but we were intentional about it, right? I mean, I'm going to eat lunch, you're going to eat lunch, why don't we just eat lunch together?
Yeah.
And so if your relationship never leaves Sunday, it will
Mhm.
never deepen.
That's fair. And I think if you wanna talk about bridges and you're wondering what those bridges can be, well, in the Christian context, one of the things I would ask is, do you know their salvation story or experience? Um, because you can ask those are questions that are probably expected, especially in a smaller group setting, Like, "Hey, we've been coming to Sunday school for 10 years, and I don't know." I'm not saying you're you be careful, don't be like, "Well, are you even a believer, bro?" That's not that's "Hey, listen,
How
I've been
many
listening to
times
your
I've
answer
wanted to ask that question.
Yeah. I've been listening to
Hey,
your answer for
hey,
10 years."
are you sure that you know Jesus?
Yeah, but I think you can even ask that question and like, "Okay, you've been coming here for a while, and, you know, is it okay if I share my story with you?" Um, you by story, be obvious with what you're saying, not your life story, but can I tell you my experience and my salvation when Jesus found me, or however you want to make the language. Um, and let them, tell your story and then ask them. And the bridge we have, number one in the church, is Christ. And that's a big bridge. That bridge is all encompassing, because it doesn't matter what side of the bridge you live on. It doesn't matter what sin you were in or what captivated you. The only freedom that we all got was through Christ. And
Right,
so have that conversation first. I mean, Paul in chains is telling his testimony, and it's Agrippa, right, that says, "Or even in this small time, are you going to convince me?" And he says, "By all everything but these chains." And everyone,
right,
I would convince everyone. And so our number one thing is Christ, and we can use that as a bridge, not to condemn, but just to say, this is how I got here. And this is why I want to know about you. These are the things, because scripture is very clear that we need each other, and
right,
and and that we're supposed to be here for each other. And I think that sometimes we're just afraid. I mean, it goes back to the intentionality, of course, but it also goes back to, we're afraid that people will know the true us. We're afraid that they'll know that my sin is way darker and deeper than I ever want to say out loud.
Well, and let me just throw this in there, because you are 100% right. And the reality and the harsh reality is that there's a reason that people are afraid of that
Mhm.
because
Sure.
they've seen it and they felt it. I mean, I know
Mhm.
of a small group that would meet. Well, it was a Sunday school class. I know of a Sunday school class that would meet where somebody was going through a very difficult time and had a really hard time getting through the class without weeping.
Mhm.
And there were people that were so uncomfortable with that level of vulnerability and with that level of hurt that they didn't come back. And it
Mm.
wasn't because the class wasn't good, and it wasn't because the teaching wasn't good, and it wasn't because of any of that. It was that they couldn't handle
Mhm.
that kind of emotional intensity. They didn't know what to
Yeah.
do with it.
Yeah.
And so, you talk about that fear, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that that fear is there for a reason.
Mhm.
People are afraid to really open up to other people because, well, they'll
Yeah.
judge me. Well, the reality is
Yeah.
that's not unfounded fear, and that's
No,
not baseless
absolutely.
fear. We've all experienced, I've experienced, you've experienced,
Mhm.
maybe you made a mistake, or maybe you made multiple mistakes, or maybe you
Sure.
didn't even make a mistake, but they thought you did, and
Mhm.
they judged you, and they spread lies about you.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to interject there real quick just to say that we talk about that fear, but I think it's important to acknowledge that that fear is real and that there are people who will do that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's 100% fair. There's a reason, there's a reason that, Paul lists gossip next to all the sexual pure sins and how damning it can be to the body, both to, your own body, your own spiritual self, but also to the body of the church and how much it can bring damage, and in that in the thing about gossip is it's not just talking about somebody, it's bringing judgment upon the person you're gossiping about, and then it's bringing judgment upon yourself.
So
And
so
sorry.
since so no, that's okay. So since you, I mean, I interrupted you, I should be saying sorry. So, but I'm not. So because you bring up gossip, right?
Mhm.
And so people have this idea, because there have been times when people have withheld information from me that I
Sure,
needed.
sure.
Just as a pastor, I needed to know that, and they
Mhm.
withheld it from me because they didn't want to be gossiping. But
Sure.
gossiping is not talking about someone when they're not there. That's not what gossip is.
Mhm.
Gossip is talking about someone when they're not there with the intent
Of
of
harm.
hurting them,
Mhm.
or maligning their character, or
Mhm.
hurting their
Yeah,
reputation.
100%.
You and I can talk about someone. We can talk about a situation that involves someone, just from the perspective of, hey, I pastored there, you're pastoring there. Now, here's what you need to know. And I'm,
Sure,
I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to run them in the ground. I'm
sure.
not trying to ruin them for you.
Yeah,
But there are things that you need to know. There are things you need to be aware of.
yeah. 100%. I think, I had the pastor who came into a church that I was already at for 3 or 4 years. I told him, I'm like, yeah, I know you're gonna make your own judgment calls, but these are some families you need to be aware of, and some of the things that they've done since I've been here that have been hurtful to the body. You're the shepherd, and you're up on deck, and they didn't just change overnight because you're the new guy. And so, yeah, but it also is, yeah, I think people need to understand that sometimes things just need to be said, not because we're trying to hurt somebody. There's a difference. It's all in the intent of the heart. If I'm talking about Chris just to badmouth Chris, then I have to check my heart and the things I'm saying. But if I'm also coming to ask Chris for advice as a church member, not even as a pastor, let's just pretend for a second that I'm at your church now and somebody's come to me with something I know nothing about. I know nothing about this, but for some reason God has brought them to me for whatever reason that is, and I'm on a cliffhanger because I don't know what to do. Well, if I turn to my shepherd, he's going to need a little more info than just a little bit, you know. And I think there are ways to have these conversations in a non-gossip way to move forward and help and those types of things. But I think in the context of this conversation thing, as you're trying to draw closer to someone, is for sure understand that there's that fear of, because if I don't know you yet, I think this is part of the proof, right? The proof's in the pudding. When I tell you these things and then you keep them to yourself, then there's an accountability, there's a trust there that I've now established with you. And sometimes that's why, you need to kind of bring some rapport with you, because if you're trusting me with, say, sensitive information or whatever you want to call it, then there's some accountability, like, okay, they're giving trust to me, and now I think I can give trust to them, and so those things. I think you hit the nail on the head by saying that these are rational fears. These are rational thoughts to have because we're wicked people. I mean, we are wicked people. And as well as I do, I've had close friends that are no longer friends, or have put me in predicaments that I have to now think through, and and it's like, whoa, I never saw that coming. I have my best friend growing up even got in the church together, and he was saved before me, and there's been some things that are absolutely wild that have made choices for Miles not be able to be around them, and or trust them with things that I would trust them with before. Um, but you don't know, and you can't
Right.
be scared of that either, because the Lord is our keeper,
Right.
and the Lord is the one who is ultimately holding us to himself, and so don't let that scare you, but also be mindful, right? To be wise as a serpent, right? And understand these things, because there are people that you just don't talk to.
Right.
And I hate to say it that
Sure.
way, but there are those people that I would, unless I want something to get out, I don't tell them. I
Yeah,
don't.
and there have been people at every church that if I wanted to float an idea just to see what kind of feedback I'd get, like, I know who I could go to,
Hey, I did that this
because
week.
I could tell somebody something and I knew that it was gonna get
Yeah,
out, but I wanted it to
100%.
get out, right?
Yep.
So even I suppose even those people can serve a purpose,
That's
and,
right. Hey,
so
the
praise
Lord,
the Lord.
works in mysterious ways.
So if we're gonna kinda bring this back, let me just reemphasize this idea that biblical community, and that's really what our listener is
Mhm,
asking about. So biblical community has to be intentional.
mhm.
It's not going to happen by accident.
Yep.
And just loving people requires that we move toward them,
Mhm,
that we listen, that we bear burdens, that we enter into their life. You can't. If I could sum it up, I would sum it up like this: You can't one another people from a distance. You
that's
can't
right.
love one another from a distance. You can't bear the burdens of one another from a distance. You can't, I mean, you really can't
Mhm.
even really pray for one another from a distance. I mean, you can, but, as far as like
Yep.
really entering into, their struggles
Intercessor.
and what it is they're
Yep.
dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think, one of the things I would tell someone is put your gloves on and be ready for hurt, be ready for pain, be ready for all the emotions, um, but also understand there will be a time when you will need someone to carry you.
Right.
And so when you're learning and learning how to love people, and your life doesn't stop either. And so just because you're trying to do this well, there's a time where you need to realize that you may be the person that needs someone to carry.
Right.
Someone needs to carry you. And so I think just being conscious of these things, not that I'm trying to I'm not trying to paint a picture where I don't want you to do this. I want you to understand that living and bearing one another's burdens, it's saying one another, that puts yourself in that same wheelbarrow, that there are times when you need someone. And so if you've needed someone and someone showed up, do what they did for you. Be open, be available, and stop thinking the 5-minute handshaking time's enough.
Right.
Stop thinking that Sunday school is enough. If your house is dirty and you're afraid to bring them to your house, take them to McDonald's. It'll be okay. Ask the sentiment. And somewhat, if you have children, listen, people who have raised children understand what it's like to have
Right.
tornadoes that live in your
Absolutely.
house. And if you're afraid to invite your pastor over because your house is dirty, get over it. Just get over it, because guess what? All of us have our own things. And until they break that confidence and in trust and in love in you, extend the olive branch. Extend it and let God do the work, because ultimately that's what you're asking. You're asking that God would bring you to someone who needs you at this point in time. Or better yet, we believe in sovereignty. I hope if you're listening to this podcast, you're sitting under my preaching or you're sitting under Chris's preaching, and I'm pretty sure we use sovereignty a lot. Nah, just a little bit. That's right. And so if that's true, then God has put you exactly where you need to be for a time. And so look for those places in which God has given you the ability to be there. And look for the people that you need. And man, the early church did not just gather for an hour and love each other. They didn't suffer and die and bleed with one another for the 5-minute welcome. No, they spent they spent time, they spent money, resources. They had to love each other because that's all they had, the community. And they had one purpose and one goal. And that's why reading the book of Acts is always so interesting to me, to be of one mind and to be in unity and thinking that through, that, hey, this was possible under persecution. It should be even greater in a place of freedom.
Right.
And so, just be open and just be praying and intentional. So
Yeah,
sorry.
and I would just close it out like this. Just take, choose one person, um, and just take one step, right?
Yeah.
Ask one real question, or,
Hmm.
just shoot them a text or invite them to coffee. But just take that first step toward that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's honestly the hardest thing to do, is just take that
Hmm.
first step. And so be intentional about it, and do it. And let's see
Yeah,
what the Lord does.
absolutely. And hang in there.
Yep.
Hang in there, because what is it, Adrian Rod? No, I won't say that. We'll move on. Adrian Rogers is one of Miles's heroes.
I know
Um,
that.
and there's Chris Ruwalt. He's
Well,
at the top. It's hard to beat that. And
yeah.
then,
I mean that's pretty much
Adrian.
the pinnacle.
Yeah. And then there's Adrian Rogers somewhere underneath,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
you know,
Yeah,
so, wow.
yeah.
Well, just remember that God is patient with us. He's kind with us. And I guess I'll leave you with Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to everyone, forgiving each other as Christ Jesus forgave you. Just remember, the forgiveness that Christ gave us is an amazing thing. And if we stick with that, developing relationships and working through hard times, all those things are wrapped up in the gospel, because Jesus loves us. And so
Amen.
I'll be praying for you guys as well. And we appreciate the questions more than you know. And Chris, always good to see you. We're going to end a little early. That's strange, but
I mean, a couple minutes, but it's not bad.
no, I
It's
think
not
we had
bad.
a pretty good podcast. So
Yeah.
thanks
We'll
for the
send
questions.
this one in for podcast of the year and see how we do.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, good to see you. We'll see you next time.